Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome back to Watchbox Studios. This is Watches Tonight. This evening, we anticipate a potential 2024 Tudor Submariner. Get close with Philippe Dufour. We chat live, and I share your wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. And if you enjoy this program, definitely check out my Instagram, where I am Tim_Mosso. You have little leads like the Chris Lee Collector Conversation. You can link off to that. You can see the 60-second quick reviews of everything from Patek Philippe marine chronometers to a recently posted Ulysse Nardin automaton minute repeater. That's one of the best finished watches I've seen in a long time. So check out the action, which runs in parallel 24 hours a day on Tim_Mosso. We have Matt F. in the box, Enrique Casiano, Arto Charles from New York City, James Fernandez from Phoenix, Chris Lee, he was on your screen, now he's in the box, Mateo C., Thomas Burnett, Watches with Dennis from Kansas, Decilis 2, Eric Nielsen, and Joe Tyson from Apex, North Carolina, Richard Combs from South Florida, Biohazer from Dublin, Ireland, John Goodman, happy Halloween, and Butek One, welcome from Poland. Okay, so guys, viewer wrist shots, we're starting off with who else? Chris Lee and his Vacheron Overseas Dual Time and my Time Out hat. More Time Out gear to come, but we've got a limited number of hats that we've been sending out to our good friends, and Chris is high on that list. Marceau R. showcases the UN Marine Tourbillon he bought from Watchbox for his 50th birthday. Thank you for trusting our company. Marcio M. of Richmond, Virginia captures the Patek Philippe 5320G perpetual calendar and his Shih Tzu in the background, watches and whiskers. Kunal M. picked up not one but two watches with his Rolex Yachtmaster and his G-Shock this week. Mohammed E. of Nairobi, Kenya combines the Moser Pioneer Black with Jaguar F-Pace automobile, and Sorab P. celebrates Halloween early with his Louis Erard Konstantin Chaikin Time Eater Dusk Till Dawn. Very cool, guys. Halloween, it's in the air. Now it's on your screen. All right. Send your wrist shots to MondayMailbag@thewatchbox.com if you want to see your wrist on my list. Tim Mancuso joining in. Happy Halloween. Good to see you in the box. Scott I. We got Adam A. from Minnesota, Dr. Stu, Jay Parmesan, good to see you from New York City. We have Ankik B. joining in from DC. We've got Fed S. We've got Junior Johnson and Chaitanya K. from Seattle. Welcome Mark S. from Brooklyn. Okay, so think about this for a moment. 2024 Tudor Submariner. Rolex doesn't do retro watches, but its sister brand, Tudor, absolutely does. Even more intriguing, Tudor seems to be uniquely willing to launch tribute watches that reference not only Tudor's past, but Rolex's own heritage. An example of that, consider the 2018 Black Bay GMT, where literally the year Rolex brings back the steel Pepsi GMT, Tudor does exactly the same thing. There was the 2022 Black Bay Pro, which was the best 1971 Rolex Explorer 2 re-edition that Rolex never made. And then there's the 2023 GMT White, which is an homage to the Rolex Pan Am Executive Dial GMT from the 1950s. These are references to Rolex's back catalog of vintage classics. And this is particularly true in the case of the Black Bay Pro, which again is basically a 1655 Explorer 2 tribute watch. So, and that's probably the Rolex Explorer 2 that Rolex should have launched in 2021 instead of the watch we actually got. But as far back as 2019, here's something more intriguing. Tudor previewed a possible resurrection of the Submariner model name once shared between Tudor and its sister brand Rolex. Despite the success of and Tudor's significant investment in the Black Bay dive watch line, persistent rumors of an explicitly Submariner branded Tudor dive watch refuse to die. Now, with the 70th anniversary of the Tudor Submariner looming in 2024, now is the time to discuss why and why not Tudor may choose to resurrect this legendary name in really just a few short months from now. I think we would probably see it sometime around Watches and Wonders if it happens, which is to say we are practically on the doorstep of one of the biggest model name revivals in a long time. And this could definitely happen. Let's talk about the history of Tudor dive watches leading up to the present day and how this could bring us to a Tudor Submariner. So, Here's a timeline. Starting in 1954, Tudor, 1 year after the Rolex Submariner, launches the Tudor Submariner. It's a 100-meter watch. It is the reference 7922. It uses a Rolex Submariner case. It uses a Rolex Oyster rivet bracelet, and it's powered by, and this is really the only difference, a Fleurier 390 caliber versus a Rolex Agler movement. 1999, the long run of Tudor Submariner ends with the 79190. That's an example that I reviewed. That is the official end of Tudor Submariners, and it preceded by a short number of years the withdrawal of Tudor from the United States market and the contraction of the brand. So not a great move. 2012, after a decade adrift, Tudor launches the Heritage Black Bay, a breakthrough model that refocuses the company on retro design and spearheads its 2013 to the USA market, largely on the back of work by two men, the CEO, Philippe Dufour, and Davide Cerato, design lead. Now, both of these guys were at Tudor through the period when watches like the Vintage Chrono, the Vintage Chrono Blue, the Heritage Black Bay bowed and rebuilt Tudor's image, not so much as a junior Rolex, but as the company that would do what Rolex wouldn't, which is explicit homage timepieces. Rolex watches are evergreen, like a Porsche 911. They're not retro. They represent what the watch looks like after endless decades of refinement, whereas something like the Tudor brand represents the Ford GT of 2004, something that was explicitly marketed as a throwback to a long discontinued style. And that's exactly what Tudor used in its incredible, now more than decade-long surge to become one of the hottest mainstream luxury watch brands in the business. So moving forward, the Black Bay is, for all intents and purposes, a Tudor Submariner tribute in all but name. At least it was as close as the still recovering Tudor brand was allowed to get to a Submariner re-edition. So 2016, the Black Bay gains in-house calibers, a black steel model, which you see right there, and the Black Bay Bronze, a bigger 43mm version of the watch in bronze. For 2017, Tudor launched the Black Bay Chronograph, which was a tribute to a number of big crown and big block chronographs of the 1970s, and then the two-tone S and G for steel and gold, the return of the rare today wrapped or rolled gold watch, as the crown and the center links of the bracelet are actually gold-wrapped steel, something we hadn't seen in a while. 2018 marked the return of the Black Bay GMT that you saw earlier, simultaneously with the steel Rolex Pepsi, which I thought was incredible that Rolex would allow them to get away with that. Hey, you want the Rolex Pepsi? Here's one you can get now for half the price. Still surprises me to this day. 2019, Tudor disappoints and shocks collectors with a watch I happen to love and think is the most underrated modern Tudor alongside the Cognac Heritage Advisor Alarm, and that is the P01, the Black Bay P01, a tribute to an obscure late 60s prototype. It's a cool watch, but aside from its obscure origins and unorthodox appearance, the P01 drew fire from many Tudor fans because of a preceding social media rollout that had led many to believe the upcoming dive watch was going to be a Tudor Submariner re-edition. It didn't happen. Instead, we got a very weird watch that appealed to very few people and is hard to wear on a normal-sized wrist. I love the P01 because Tudor did something risky and offbeat, and which had very little commercial upside, and it's still in the catalog. One of my favorites, but it's sort of, what is that, a Marmite taste, I think our Australian friends would say. Now, here's the thing. But that year did bring a watch that could be considered a Tudor Submariner in the Black Bay 58, thinner, 39 millimeters, with a new movement, the 5400 series, designed specifically for a smaller case. Now we're getting a lot closer to the size and aspect ratio of a 50s or early 60s Tudor Rolex Submariner. 2021 greeted a variation on the Black Bay 58, the scintillating sterling silver Black Bay AG 925. Sterling, not something we've seen a lot in the stainless steel era. Really, since Firth Brown created Sta-Brite in the 1920s, the watch world has been moving away from sterling silver, partly because it's more expensive than steel, but partly because not only is it more expensive than steel, but being about 6% copper, it will change color, it will patina a bit, and if you've got a particular type of body chemistry, it'll actually turn your wrist bluish green. But I thought this was absolutely awesome. And with the taupe dial and the taupe bezel insert, I didn't think there was much legs left in the Black Bay, and this took it in a completely different and fresh direction. So, the 2021 Black Bay ceramic also marked a landmark for the brand in that it was the first ceramic Black Bay made in series production, but also a real upmarket move towards Omega territory as the first Métas certified master chronometer product from either Rolex or Tudor. Yes, master chronometer is an open standard. It's not just an Omega thing. Anyone can certify a watch as a master chronometer if the watch can meet the standards, and this one did. And it was the start of master chronometer certification for Tudor. 2022 was the year of the Black Bay Pro, which we discussed before, a great first series Explorer 2 tribute. And then that really was a 1655, and you can see they're very close in design. And it is the watch that Rolex should have made when it redesigned the Explorer 2 in 2021. You can see what the redesigned Explorer 2 looked like. It should have been smaller, it should have been simpler, it should have been what Tudor made. Okay, before we jump forward, viewer wrist shots number 2. Jimmy Y joins us with the Hulk and the Hulk for Halloween. Warren prepares for liftoff at Denver International Airport with vintage Omega Flightmaster. And a shout out to Watchbox Reviews, which he used as a guide 5 years ago to buying that watch. We have Jose M from New York, or New Jersey, pardon. I'm going to get all sorts of flack from Jose for that. New Jersey is not New York, tri-state, but there's always a rivalry. Taking to the street with BMW and Tag Heuer Aquagraph. And Henry K. from San Fran has a special delivery from Bob's Donuts, a local institution, and Omega Speedmaster Professional on a custom strap. Wakar A. prepares for a game of cricket with G-Shock and the mysterious and highly desirable limited edition Tim Mosso Time Out hat. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. What else is going on? Watches with Dennis. I would have gone with the silver Black Bay, but I couldn't get past them sticking on a display case back to showcase the Spartan movement rather than spending a bit more for a silver closed case back. I sort of agree with you right there, especially with the precious metal watch. I really don't want to see a utilitarian movement if I could have a solid precious metal case back. Now granted, it's silver, which isn't worth all that much, but still, it's almost an insult that you're showing me a movement that you know to be incredibly rustic and expecting me to be amazed by this. It's almost like when Oris put display case back on Salida calibers. It didn't belong there. I would prefer a nice case back design, maybe an etchings of some sort, something interesting to look at that doesn't take me for a fool. I definitely agree with you, watches with Dennis. Okay, Mark S. saying the Halloween episode, risky, upbeat, with limited financial upside, like the Tudor Black Bay P01, which Tim loves. That's true. On every, by the way, supernovae, wow, okay. Too many syllables there, but saying Marmite is British, Vegemite is Australian. I knew Vegemite was Australian. I thought it might also be Marmite. See, this is why you guys are here. You help me out with all the stuff that's not cars and watches, the stuff that I don't know about the world. We have Davis Parish Productions joining in from Chicago, and Elder Pinto, greetings from Holland, staying up late with me. We have Celine Driver saying, I have to admit, though I am tempted by the Black Bay 925, I am tempted by the Tudor Black Bay 925 silver case. You and me both. I would love to see a full rivet style bracelet for that made of silver. To me, that would be the clincher. That would be really cool. And what does silver cost? Like $25 an ounce? It wouldn't be that much more expensive. Okay, we have Joshua K joining in from Utah, Jonathan Smith from Connecticut, and Mark S. What does everyone think of Joma Shop? It's a gray market dealer. I mean, you know exactly what you're getting. Ask them beforehand whether you're getting a factory warranty or a Joma shop warranty. That's what I'd ask. And Alex T, greetings from London on a clear night. Welcome, guys. Adam joining in from Sheffield, also known as the Steel City of England. Okay, 2024 Tudor Submariner. Now is where we're going to talk about what we're actually getting and our prospects of getting it in the first place. So having retraced the life cycle of the Tudor Black Bay from its origin to the current collection, let's examine the 2023 Tudor Black Bay releases and consider whether they leave an opening for the 2024 Tudor Submariner. 2023 has brought a third generation Black Bay 41, which is entirely redesigned, and really every single detail is changed, from the stem tube assembly to the crown to the dial to the bracelet to the bezel to the movement. It is a full redesign, and although at first glance it may not seem that way, this is the biggest redesign of the model since it came out in 2012. Now we've also got a GMT white dial, which we mentioned earlier is a tribute to the Pan Am executive dials on the Rolex 6542 in the 1950s. But the headliner has been the 37mm Black Bay 54. Tudor bills this as nothing less than a tribute to the first Tudor Submariner, the 7922. So it might seem like at face value, this is the Tudor Submariner re-edition based on the initial model, but it's not quite that. Here's why. First, here's why I think we've still got a chance of a Tudor Submariner happening. So, the reason is simple. A one-year edition based on this watch, the Black Bay 54, has at least a 50-50 chance. Because if you look at the Black Bay 54 and then you look at the real 1954 model, you could see as you jump between the two that the BB54 is an exact match for the historic watch. It's not, especially where the dial is concerned. The Black Bay 54 is more of a polyglot of Tudor sub-styles from the 50s through the mid-70s. That's why we have those snowflake hands on there, and yet a 50s and 60s style chapter ring dial. This is a watch that covers all of its bases without really specializing. In 1954, the watch had Mercedes hands. It was a lot more like a Submariner of the day than the current Black Bay 54 is like any Submariner in the collection now. So how do we get from here to a modern Tudor Submariner? Well, that's very easy. Tudor does what Moser does with its Streamliner each year, with the Streamliner dials, and Audemars did with the 50th anniversary Royal Oak rotors. Produce a one-year dial that matches what was made in 1954 and do it on the basic Black Bay 54 platform. The rest of the Black Bay 54 already looks the part. So Tudor understands the power of one-year signatures, given the pre-owned market's feeding frenzy for the first-year Pelagos FXD and the edition MN21, which was basically just a case back made for 1 year. But the market considers this to be the one to own, and anything subsequent to this is considered to be of secondary interest, even though it's almost the exact same watch in every substantive respect. So a dial job for 1 year from Tudor, branded Submariner with Mercedes hands and the 1950s graphics, that would be a really big deal to Tudor Rolex guys. I would also say there's an opportunity to make something that we would remember forever, particularly if you combine a plexiglass crystal on that one-year dial and maybe even do a spectacular thing and find new old stock Fleurier 390 calibers, which are actually what powered that original 7922. Don't make a ton of them. Number them if you want. 1 year only, limited edition. Price them realistically, make them accessible, and then make sure that people who want to keep them get them. People who are previous Tudor customers. For once, you would have a wait list for a Tudor watch and a vetting process for customers. And while I don't necessarily love the idea of wait lists, I do love the idea of the guy who went out and got the Heritage Advisor and the P01 and the Ranger and the North Flag, being the dude who can also get the limited edition Tudor Submariner. I think that would be genuinely cool and a way to reward the guy who's a real Tudor enthusiast. And I also think that there's a chance something like this could happen. So, at the end of the day, it would be even cooler if they did it backwards. Instead of having a vintage watch that looks like a Tudor Submariner, go back to the old school practice. Say, instead of using the Black Bay 54 platform, we start using one case and bracelet and clasp for both Rolex and Tudor for a very special model for just 1 year. Take the Rolex Submariner 124060, imagine the no-date sub sharing a case and a bracelet with a Tudor branded Submariner, and you have a Tudor dial and a Tudor movement like the 5400, which is thin enough to go in this case. And instead of having a vintage style Tudor branded sub, you have a modern Tudor branded sub that revives the sharing of exterior hardware between Rolex and Tudor. I know it'll never happen, but this would be the coolest way that Tudor could mark the 70th anniversary of the Tudor Submariner. Not a vintage watch in style, but in spirit. And that would be my choice. It wouldn't be as affordable as a Black Bay, but it would be really cool. So that is the stuff of fantasy, but then again, this hobby is built to inspire and serve the fantasies of collectors. Wrist shots number 3. Okay, Stephen E. lights up your screen with the Ball Engineer Marvelite Carrying Edition. Those are very cool watches. Ball, highly underrated. O&H and his JLC Master Control Sector Dial. Pilot, his Alfa Romeo Giulia, very cool, underrated sports sedan. Shamal D is in Japan, native land of his Grand Seiko Midnight Dial, Mount Iwate, and you can see the lovely topography of Japan. That is the Midnight Mount Iwate dial. Bruno I joins us from Sao Paulo, Brazil, with a Negroni, Smooth Potations, and Rolex Kermit. We have Nathaniel K. of South Florida sporting his IWC Ingenieur dual time during Sunday shopping. Send your wrist shots to MondayMailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your analog on my digital. Okay, Halloween watches and Philippe Dufour. I've received requests for at least a few years now to record a Halloween episode. And while 90% of those requests have come from the same guy, I can at least say that he's been a consistent supporter, which I always appreciate, and I aim to please. So tomorrow is Halloween, and because I can't throw away an entire episode with a Halloween theme no one would watch, here goes with a few special watches that are particularly spooky for All Hallows Eve, starting with the 2023 Louis Erard Konstantin Chaikin Time Eater. While hardly the scariest thing to come out of Russia in the last few years, this monocular monster is pretty hairy by watch standards. Based on the Slavic folklore monster known as the Liko, the Time Eater, like the monster, has one eye. It's a collaboration between independent watchmaker Konstantin Chaikin of Russia and Louis Erard, which has made a name for itself with collaborations over the last few years. Another monster-themed watch arrived in 2019, the Grand Seiko Godzilla 65th Anniversary SBGA 405. Larger than life, 44.5mm titanium, limited edition of 650 pieces, included a dial inspired by Godzilla's nuclear fire breath, a Godzilla-inspired leather strap, and a caseback depiction of the original Godzilla design of 1954. There he is in his glory. Take that, 1954 Tudor Submariner. 1954, the first year of Godzilla, and a Grand Seiko watch to match. 2009, Romain Titanic DNA Oxy 3 chronograph tourbillon. Before its 2020 bankruptcy, Romain issued a series of watches featuring material samples from, for example, that unpronounceable Icelandic volcano, the moon, and infamously actual oxidized steel from the Titanic. I reviewed one of these in the Watch You Want days, and I have to admit I was uncomfortable even to be around it. Not necessarily because I'm a religious person, but I believe in karma, and given that Romain later went bankrupt, maybe karma kills. But my opinion on this series is well known, and I thought from the beginning that being essentially grave robbing, it was in bad taste. Archaeologists, it's important to say, unearthed tombs to expand our understanding of the vintage past in the only way possible, direct observation. So, Robert Ballard, the American scientist who found the Titanic in 1985, said that he doesn't view the Titanic as legitimate archaeology, or at least Titanic recovery as legitimate archaeology, because he reasonably concludes we know everything about how people lived in 1912. We even have motion pictures from the period. So all you're really doing is robbing the grave, usually for the sake of profit, whether you're selling the goods or merely exhibiting them, as Romain Jerome did in both cases, selling and exhibiting. I imagine that profiteering off luxury lifestyle Titanic tie-ins is the ultimate expression of bad taste and unsound reasoning, and this kind of thinking in a lot of ways is still with the watch industry today. Okay, spookiness. The terror of the Philippe Dufour simplicity. I'm sure you're wondering, what's so scary about this 34mm watch? Well, there's the price, which is probably at least $700,000. And if that doesn't basically stop your heart and give you the chills, and I think that's terrifying enough for our Halloween feature, let's take a look at how frighteningly beautiful it is in detail. We saw this watch last week on the show from a distance. I put it under my camera, but I didn't get particularly close. Now I'm going to take you closer than you've ever been to a watch that few people will ever experience firsthand. Some background on Dufour and the watch. He was born in 1948 in Le Sentier in the Vallée du Jeu. In 1967, after a 4-year watch school, he graduated and went to work at his local watchmaker, Jaeger-LeCoultre. Later, he would work on, among others, Audemars Piguet, progressing in the late 70s to create his own workshop. In the 1980s, he created Grande Sonnerie watches for Audemars Piguet. These were pocket watches, before in 1992 creating the first wristwatch Grande Sonnerie. After that, the Duality of 1992, which was only made in 9 copies, 2 escapements, 2 balances, a differential, a very cerebral watch. In the late 90s, he had collectors from the Japanese market asking for a watch that would be made specifically for the Japanese market, and the Simplicity was born. A relatively basic, classically inspired watch, inspired by the mid-century watches that Philippe Dufour restored during the 1970s. It was 34 or 37 millimeters, your choice, very much a product of its era in size as well as its target market. So, here's where we get into the actual watch that I showed you last week. Despite its 34mm size, the watch wears with real presence and never appears too small. We're going to get a lot closer. Dufour is very open about outsourcing components such as his dial, for example, which are supplied with enamel or engine turning by Metalem, a well-known dial specialist. Cases included welded lugs, and you can see what I mean by a welded lug. This lug and that case were made as separate parts, welded together, and then using polishing and files, the gathered material of the weld was removed. Think of how a bike frame is welded. It's ugly. At best, it looks like a stack of dimes. At worst, a disfigured caterpillar. This is seamless. This is hand-finished welded lug construction. And again, Dufour does go to suppliers for major assemblies like this. The movement, shocking at first glance, not for its quality, but for its immense dimensions. Guys, this is a 34mm watch with a 30mm movement. For a manual wind caliber, that was way ahead of its time back in the year 2000 when the first Simplicity was brought to market. Linger on that for a moment. Look at that black polished click on top of the barrels. Look how beautifully shaded and broad those stripes are. Every single screw black from black polish, and devil's horns over the center wheel, a signature of Philippe Dufour watchmaking dating back to the Sonnerie pocket watches he made for AP in the 80s. Check out the bevels. Broad, mirrored, and now you can see more precisely what I mean when I talk about the devil's horns over the center wheel. You can also see, off to the left, the inward angle created where 2 bevels meet in a sharp crease. That takes time. That takes several steps, starting with metal files and ending in gentian wood. Another angle reveals how bright the bevels appear at close range. Note how perfectly rounded they are. I believe that Philippe Dufour uses thicker than standard bridges, so he can draw the bevels particularly deep and broad like that. And he also uses a material called Mosso, which Longo would call German silver, only he rhodium plates it to give it a silvery shine, but it's the same material. It finishes beautifully, but it takes an expert's touch to achieve that. Look at how well defined the inward angles are. Not a hint of mass production or lathe work right here. And check out the chamfered slot of that screw off to the side. You can see it has a splayed V shape to the slot. And then there's a little bevel around the outer circumference. And you can see from that angle how it looks like a mirror, bright. You're going to see from another angle how it can look black. Black polish is a mirrored surfacing that appears black from most angles. Here you can see the escape wheel cock, and that steel cap on the escape wheel cock transitions from sort of gray to black as the effective angle of vantage point changes. You can see how something that is mirror polished can look completely black if you're not gazing at it from the one angle in which it reflects light. You can also see on both the bridge and the cock cap how deep and mirrored those countersinks are for the jewels, and there's a purpose to that. Historically, that kind of cupped beveling was intended to make sure that oils found the center pivot rather than flowing out across the bridges. Most elements of fine finish have functional roots, like beveling, which was designed to remove all of the burrs and sharp edges on the edge of a bridge so that if you struck the bridge with a screwdriver or a tool, you wouldn't break off a burr that would find its way into the gear train. So most of these finishing elements, the anglage, the partridge eye, they actually have functional roots, and it is very cool to see that at close range. Right here you can see a slightly different vantage point of the same surface. Now you can see how the steel cap has turned entirely black. Same piece, but absolutely no light reflected. It's as dark as Vantablack when you look at it from any direction but the one in which it reflects light. That's why we call it black polish, Pali Noir. Again, internal bevels of the ratchet wheel, teeth stand out. So here you can see what I'm talking about. Getting closer than we were before, you can see the ratchet wheel sits atop the barrel. The barrel is on the bottom. You can see that it has solarization on its silver surface. One level above that, we have the ratchet wheel, which interacts with the click to prevent the barrel from running backwards. You can see that the ratchet wheel has been media blasted, and then the little teeth have been internally beveled, artisanally and exhaustively, because this is just the right way to do it. It's how it would have been done on the finest pocket watches. It's how AP and JLC and Vacheron and Patek would have done it on wristwatches in the 40s and 50s. That's why Philippe Dufour does it that way. Again, internal bevels of the ratchet wheel may be a little bit more visible from here. You could see that little shine around their border. And then you could see the linear click and click spring. It's really one component that is both the click and the spring, and it's been rounded and mirror polished and drawn across the ratchet wheel. You'll see the same assembly on a Laurent Ferrier wristwatch today, drawn from the same mid-century modern and vintage pocket watch inspiration. Take a closer look at that click. You can see how finely finished it is, rounded and mirrored off to the left, and then off to the right, black polished and finely cut. This is interesting because that piece is actually cut using electro-spark erosion, well, I shouldn't say a mechanical, but an automated machine-guided process. Philippe Dufour is open about taking parts that are cut using automated process like CNC or electro-spark erosion, bridges, the click spring, plates, things like that, and then hand finishing them. And that's a little bit surprising to folks who might think everything he does is handcrafted from the beginning. He focuses on finish and beauty, not necessarily where the part starts, but where it ends. That is his expertise. And it might sound like a surprise, but then again, he's full of them, like this free-sprung balance. You could see he's got a free-sprung regulator. That's not very traditional. That's a modern way of fixing the stud and then adjusting the balance using those variable inertia bolts on the rim. All the timing is done that way. And despite the size of the watch at 34 millimeters, all this has a 52-hour power reserve, which is way above average for a small manual wind watch designed in the late 90s. Now, this vantage point shows you those devil's horns over the center wheel even better, as well as the incredible texturing of the Côte de Genève and the depth of the countersink around the jewels. Take a look at how well pointed that bevel is, the devil's horn profile, a perfectly straight seam where they meet, almost as sharp as a razor. There's absolutely no wobble to that seam, which is vertical from top to bottom. Super sharp Geneva waves. But look at the center wheel here. This is a decent level of internal beveling. You can see there is some there. It's above Patek and about on par with Laurent Ferrier, but compare the interior bevels of that center wheel with these that we saw from Gerard Perregaux on a recent episode of this show. Dufour often sets the pace for finishing detail, but he has a surprising number of qualitative peers and rivals in places you might not expect, like Ulysse Nardin, for example, or Lang und Heine, or Beat Haldeman, or Aaron Beche. Also important to remember, go on my Instagram right now. You can see that Ulysse Nardin automaton minute repeater with finishing that will make your eye water, that would give Philippe Dufour a run for his money. Great things often come in unheralded and unexpected packages, and that's where I look for true value in the pre-owned watch market. Okay, finishing up with Philippe, the stripes are extremely broad. You can see how luminous they are. That is great Geneva striping, and you can see that Philippe Dufour's stripes are anything but a standard wheel-laid abrasive stripe, and God help us, they're not stamped. That's what the best Côte de Genève look like. The plate reveals freehand engraving. Here is the nameplate now. This is a freestanding work of art. Take a look. The only blued screws on this movement are fixing that gold plate and the numbering plate. All of this is freehand engraved. And if you look really close, you can see that it is beautifully imperfect, and that all of this freehand engraving has been applied to a platform that's roughly 2 millimeters by 8 millimeters and irregularly shaped. It's also micro-beveled on its edge and satinated on its top. Finally, below the balance, you can appreciate that the bridge for the escapement anchor has been snailed on its top and beveled on its side. This is a rarity even at the elite level of watchmaking, where these lower level bridges are often finished with less attention to detail. And below that bridge, you can see the steel lever itself, one level lower, has been mirror polished on its top and beveled on its side. Now we're talking a piece that's smaller than an apple seed. Okay guys, viewer wrist shots number 4. Brandon reports from Death Valley with Casio G-Shock Mudmaster. Robert A. of Long Island, my neck of the woods, captures a classic wrist shot of his Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter James Bond 60th anniversary. Troy V. from Maryland packs the frame with his JLC Geophysic True Second and BMW M3. Ethan S. shares a different kind of watches and wheels with Omega Aquaterra and a Surly bike. David V. takes us home with his Vans RV7 aircraft over California with Tudor Ranger. Guys, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com with purchase and pricing details, and stay tuned to Watchbox Studios this week. I have a feeling it's going to be a big one. Time out, Tim out. Thanks to Sean, and thanks to you for logging on. Happy Halloween.